cry in the dark. The night sky above Earth was calm. But far beyond the blue planet, the void was not silent. Somewhere in the endless black, a faint signal drifted, weak, broken but alive. It was not a simple transmission, it was a cry, a voice that echoed through the stars. Most of the great empires in the galaxy dismissed it. Their stations caught the signal. Their councils heard the sound, but they laughed. They called it nothing more than static, a meaningless whisper lost in deep space. To them it was not worth a second glance. They were comfortable in their power, secure in their fleets, and blind in their arrogance. But on Earth, the signal reached old listening stations hidden deep under mountains and seas. Men and women gathered around glowing screens trying to make sense of the voice. The sound was weak, the language distorted, but it carried something that pierced every human heart. It carried fear, it carried pain, and most of all, it carried the voice of a child. A child's voice echoed again through the static. Begging for help, it was not the voice of a human child, but it was close. It carried the same trembling innocence, the same desperate plea. The operators stared in silence. The generals clenched their fists, and the leaders of Earth felt their hearts grow heavy. The world had changed long ago. Humanity was no longer the fragile race that the galaxy believed them to be. They had hidden their strength behind quiet progress. They had built warships in silence. They had forged weapons in secret, and they had trained generations of soldiers who waited for the day they would be needed. The cry came again, shaking every listener. This time it was clearer. The words were simple, filled with terror. "Please help us, they are coming." The room went silent. No one could deny what they had heard. The Galactic Council had ignored it. But Earth could not. Memories burned in human history. Memories of their own cries for help. Unanswered in times of war and suffering. They knew the weight of silence. They knew what it meant when the strong ignored the weak. Humanity would not let it happen again. A secret meeting was called, deep under the oceans. The leaders of nations, admirals, scientists, and commanders gathered. They listened to the signal again. They spoke in hushed voices, weighing the cost. If they answered this cry, they would reveal themselves to the galaxy. They would no longer be seen as weak. They would no longer be hidden. Some argued against it. They feared the risk. They feared the wrath of the predator empires that roamed the stars. But others spoke with fire in their voices. They said humanity was born to answer calls like this. They said Earth's silence had lasted long enough. The cry of the child was their call to rise. Across Earth, in hidden shipyards orbiting the moon, deep in underground hangars and beneath icy oceans, something stirred. Massive warships, built in shadow, began to awaken. Their hulls glowed with silent power. Their cannons slept but were ready to roar. These were not ships of peace, these were ships born for battle. The engineers who had built them whispered to one another. Some were afraid, others were proud. But all knew the same truth. The day had come. Humanity would step forward. The cry in the dark had been heard. On the surface of Earth, ordinary people felt it too. Farmers looking at the sky, children staring at stars, soldiers polishing their weapons. All of them felt a strange pull in their hearts, a whisper telling them that history was about to change. The signal came once more, weaker than before. As if the sender was fading, the child's voice cracked with despair. "Please, someone." And then the sound cut off into silence. That silence was louder than any explosion. In that silence, every human heart decided. The leaders no longer debated. The admirals no longer hesitated. The people no longer questioned. Humanity would answer. As night fell over the blue oceans and green lands of Earth, lights flickered on in secret command centers. Orders were given, codes were unlocked, keys were turned. Humanity's deadliest warships, hidden for decades, began to rise. They emerged from their shelters like beasts unchained. Their engines hummed with power. Their weapons glowed with readiness. No alien eye saw it, no council chamber guessed it. But in the quiet of Earth, a fleet was preparing to march into the stars. Not for conquest, not for empire, but for a single reason. Because somewhere in the dark, a child had cried and Earth had listened. And Earth would answer. Shadows over Earth. The cry had shaken Earth. But now came the silence that followed across the planet. Whispers spread in military halls and quiet homes. The people did not know all the details, but they felt the tension in the air. The world was holding its breath high above the Earth. In the shadow of the moon, colossal shapes waited. These were not ordinary ships, they were giants of steel. Hidden in black hangars carved into lunar rock, Each ship was built with patience, with secrets passed down through generations. Humanity had prepared for this day without admitting it aloud. The admirals gathered in a hidden command chamber. Their eyes were sharp, their voices calm but heavy with weight. Some wanted to delay, to gather more intelligence. Others demanded swift action. They feared the cry had already gone unanswered too long. The Council of Admirals was not alone. In the corners of the chamber sat scientists who had created weapons never tested in real war. Beside them were strategists who had studied alien empires, mapping their weaknesses in silence. And among them stood veterans of Earth's older wars. Men and women who carried scars of battles long forgotten by the galaxy. The debate was fierce. One side said humanity must stay hidden. They argued that the galaxy was vast, filled with predators that could crush Earth if provoked. They feared that by moving now, humanity would invite its own doom. The other side answered with fire in their voices. They said humanity had been underestimated for too long. They said Earth's strength was not in hiding, but in standing when others fell. Meanwhile, in secret shipyards beneath the oceans, submarines surfaced with cargo unlike any the world had seen before. Rising from the waves came parts of dreadnoughts, massive hull sections that gleamed under the moonlight. Engineers worked without rest, knowing their creations would soon face the void. In orbit, a smaller ship named Vigilant powered up. Its crew had been training in silence for years. Each soldier aboard was chosen not just for skill, but for loyalty and courage. They knew little of where they would go, but they knew why. A cry for help had reached them, and that was enough. Far away, beyond Earth's skies, the Predator Empire stirred. Scouts had already intercepted fragments of the same signal. They traced it to a broken colony on the edge of their reach. To them, the cry was no plea, it was bait. It was the sound of weakness, and predators fed on weakness. Their warlords laughed, sharpening their blades. They spoke of crushing another helpless race before humans could even arrive, but the predators did not know. Humanity was already awake back on Earth. Families gathered around screens. News networks carried nothing. Governments remained silent, but people still felt it. They saw sudden activity in bases long thought abandoned. They saw soldiers moving in quiet convoys through the night. They asked questions, but answers never came. Only a strange unity filled their hearts. The people of Earth stood ready to support whatever came next. In the command chamber, the admirals made their choice. The room fell silent as the highest-ranking officer placed a hand on the table. "We are no longer shadows," he said. "We will answer." With those words, the order spread. Across oceans, deserts, mountains, and skies, codes were unlocked, keys turned in unison. Warships came alive like sleeping giants. Their engines rumbled, their hulls gleamed, and their weapons hummed with quiet menace. In that moment, Earth was no longer hiding. The galaxy still believed humanity was weak, fragile, and harmless. But in the shadows of Earth, a fleet was rising. A fleet built not for conquest, but for protection. A fleet that would carry the answer to a cry lost in the stars. And as the ships prepared to break free of orbit, humanity itself stood at the edge of revelation. For soon, the galaxy would learn a truth it had laughed at for centuries. The shadows over Earth were lifting, and the stars would never look the same again. The gathering fleet, the order had been given. Earth was no longer silent, deep in hidden hangars. Warships stirred like ancient beasts waking from long sleep. Their steel bodies glowed with power. Their cannons hummed with energy. The fleet was gathering, and nothing would stop it now. Across the planet, men and women stepped forward. Soldiers left their homes in the night. Pilots kissed their families goodbye. Engineers tightened the last bolts on engines that had never flown in battle. It was not just an army rising. It was all of humanity moving as one in orbit. The ship Vigilant received its orders. Captain Mara, a quiet woman with sharp eyes, stood on the bridge. She looked at her crew, young faces filled with determination, and spoke only one line. "We carry the voice of the lost." The crew answered with silence, but their eyes burned with fire. On the far side of the moon, titans of steel floated into position. One by one, dreadnoughts powered their cores. The blackness of space filled with light as their engines roared. The fleet was assembling, and the galaxy would soon feel its weight. But beyond the beauty of rising ships, there was fear. The Predator Empire had already begun its hunt. Their scouts moved like vultures across the void, searching for the colony that had cried out. Their warlords wanted to make an example. They wanted the galaxy to see that cries for help meant nothing. In secret command rooms, humanity studied these movements. Holograms of enemy fleets filled the air, red markers glowing across the stars. The admirals leaned over the maps, whispering strategies. Every move was a risk. Every choice carried the chance of doom. But humanity was not stepping forward blindly. They had studied for this day. They had prepared for this war in silence. In the quiet halls of Earth's academies, cadets marched with heavy hearts. They had trained all their lives, but training was different from reality. Some were afraid, some were eager, but all were ready. Among them was a young pilot named Elias. He wrote a final letter to his sister, promising he would return. He folded it carefully, tucked it away, and walked toward his ship without looking back. The cry came again, faint but clear, cutting across all other sounds. Please, help us. The child's voice echoed in the comms once more. Every soldier, every pilot, every mechanic froze when they heard it. The room fell silent in ships and bases across Earth. That single voice united them more than any speech or order could. The fleet was no longer just preparing. It was alive. Ships rolled out of hangars, their hulls reflecting starlight. Convoys of fighters swarmed like flocks of birds. Dreadnoughts drifted into formation. Their cannons pointed toward the void, waiting. The galaxy outside still mocked humanity. Alien empires laughed in their great councils, calling humans naive. They said Earth was too small, too fragile, too young. They did not know the truth. They did not know the fire that burned in human hearts. They did not know that when humanity heard a cry, they answered at the edge of Earth's orbit. The first fleet gathered, silent and proud, 10 dreadnoughts, dozens of cruisers, hundreds of smaller ships, all carried one purpose. They were not flying to conquer. They were flying to protect. The admirals stood together in the command tower, watching as ship after ship joined the formation. The sight was overwhelming. Humanity had never shown its strength so openly, and yet this was only the beginning. A final order came across the comms, simple and clear. For the cry in the dark. Every ship answered in silence, their engines burning brighter. The fleet was ready. The gathering was complete. Now the stars themselves seemed to wait, holding their breath for what would come next. Because once humanity moved, the galaxy would never be the same again. First contact with fire, the fleet moved. Silent engines carried humanity's deadliest warships into the cold void. The stars stretched out before them, endless and merciless. For the first time in history, Earth was not hiding. Earth was advancing. Scouts flew ahead, small ships darting through asteroid fields. Their mission was simple: to find the source of the cry, to find who had called out for help. The admiral's orders echoed in their ears. Do not let the predators strike first. Hours passed in silence. Only the hum of engines filled the air. Pilots sat tense in their cockpits, fingers on triggers, eyes on the void. Then the silence broke. Radar lit up with movement. Dozens of hostile signals appeared, closing fast. The Predator scouts had found them, sleek, curved ships built for speed and cruelty. They moved like hunting wolves, their comms filled with laughter, distorted alien voices mocking. The humans dare to fly beyond their nest, one voice hissed, another snarled. We will crush them and make the stars remember their weakness. On the Vigilant, Captain Mara stood still, eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. Her crew waited for her command. Fear hung heavy, but no one spoke it. Finally, her voice cut through the silence. Weapons free. The first human railgun fired. The shot tore through the void, a blazing streak of light faster than the eye could follow. It slammed into the Predator ship, and in one instant the vessel was gone. Not broken, not crippled, but erased. The Predators went silent, their laughter stopped. Confusion rippled through their ranks. They had expected fragile ships, weak weapons, desperate humans. Instead, they faced death itself. Human ships opened fire, railguns roared, plasma lances burned through enemy hulls. Missiles screamed across the void. One after another, Predator ships exploded, scattering fire and metal across the darkness. On the bridge of a Predator command ship, the warlord stared in disbelief. His crew shouted warnings, alarms blared. He slammed his clawed hand against the console. Impossible, he roared. They are only humans, but the humans were not weak. They were precise, they were relentless. They fought not for empire, not for power, but for a child's cry, and that gave them strength no Predator could understand. The battle was short, brutal, and one-sided. By the time silence returned, the asteroid field was filled with drifting wreckage. Predator corpses floated in the void. Their empire had lost scouts. Their pride had lost even more on the Vigilant. Captain Mara stood as the smoke cleared from her screens. Her crew stared at the battlefield in awe. They had won, but her voice was steady. "This was only the beginning," she said. Back on Earth, the admirals watched the live feed. Their faces were grim. The predators would not retreat quietly. This first contact would spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Council would hear, the empires would hear, and soon the full weight of the Predator Armada would come. But humanity did not falter. If anything, their resolve grew stronger. Across the fleet, crews worked in silence, reloading, repairing, preparing. They knew the next battle would not be against scouts. It would be against legions. The cry had been heard. The first fire had been answered. Humanity was no longer in the shadows. Humanity had stepped into the storm, and the galaxy was about to learn the price of underestimating Earth. The siege of stars, the galaxy trembled as news spread. Scouts of the Predator Empire had been destroyed, not by an ancient power, not by a mighty empire, but by humans. The council chambers filled with laughter. They said it was a trick, a lie, an illusion, but the Predators knew the truth, and their rage burned hotter than suns. On the edges of the Predator Empire, a lonely colony floated, scarred and broken. This was where the cry had come from. The small world had once been full of life. Now it was ruins and ash. Its people hid in the shadows of shattered cities, whispering prayers into the dark. They did not know if anyone had heard them. They did not know if hope was real, but the Predators knew. They had traced the cry back here. Their warlords gathered fleets larger than most empires had ever seen. Thousands of ships formed a ring of fire around the colony. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, all bristling with weapons. Their commanders gave the order to burn the world and silence the cry forever. The colony's skies filled with shadows. Mothers clutched their children. Elders closed their eyes, believing the end had come. The voice that had once called across the stars now trembled in silence, too weak to rise again. And then the darkness changed. The first Terran warship dropped from faster-than-light travel. Its steel body glowed as it cut across the void. One ship became 10, 10 became 100 in minutes. The human fleet arrived, surrounding the colony with shields of fire. The Predators roared in fury. "You dare!" their warlords spat. "You dare defy us." But the humans did not answer with words. Instead, every channel in the system lit up with a single broadcast. A calm voice carried across the stars. "We heard your cry. We are here." The people of the colony wept. The children pressed their faces to broken windows. Staring at the lights in the sky, hope had returned. Carried on the wings of human warships, the Predators gave no mercy. Their fleets advanced. Thousands of ships lit up the void. Weapons charged, cannons aimed. They wanted to drown humanity's courage in blood. On the Vigilant, Captain Mara stood steady. "Hold the line," she ordered. Her crew tightened their grips. Every soldier ready to give their life. Dreadnoughts moved into formation. Cruisers spread their wings. Fighters swarmed like sparks across the battlefield. The first volleys came. Predator cannons spat fire. Missiles streaked through the void. Space shook with the fury of 1,000 suns. Shields rippled, ships trembled, but the line did not break. Humanity held. Then came the answer. The Terran fleet opened fire. Railguns cracked like thunder. Plasma lances tore through enemy hulls. Missiles screamed into carriers, exploding with fire bright enough to blind. Predator ships shattered one after another. Their laughter turned to screams. The battle raged, more savage than any the galaxy had seen in centuries. For every human ship lost, 10 Predators burned. For every fighter shot down, more rose to take its place. Humanity fought like wolves protecting their pack. Fierce, relentless, unyielding from the surface of the colony. Survivors watched the sky burn. They saw enemy ships fall in fire. They saw human warships glow like guardians of light. And for the first time, they believed the cry had not been in vain. Yet even as victory seemed near, a shadow deeper than all others appeared. At the edge of the system, massive shapes emerged, larger than mountains, darker than night. The Predator Empire had unleashed its armada. A fleet so vast it blotted out the stars. Humanity's admirals stared at the screens in silence. The size of the enemy force was beyond anything they had faced. But no one spoke of retreat. No one whispered of surrender. The child's cry still echoed in their hearts. and that was enough. The siege of stars had begun, and humanity stood in the fire without fear. The warship's roar, the Predator armada filled the void. Ship after ship stretched across the blackness, an endless sea of steel and fire. The colony below shivered in its ruins, for above them raged the largest fleet the stars had ever seen. Human warships stood like a wall of light, small compared to the enemy, fewer in number but unbroken. They were surrounded, outgunned and outnumbered. Yet no Terran ship moved back, not one on the Vigilant. Captain Mara stood at the front of her bridge. Her crew's faces glowed under the red light of alarms. Her voice carried steady and calm. "We do not fight for conquest. We fight for the cry," the crew answered with silence, their hands gripping controls with iron resolve. The Predators opened fire first. Thousands of cannons roared, filling the sky with firestorms. Missiles screamed through the void. Beams of plasma tore through the dark. Entire sections of space lit up like suns exploding. The Terran line trembled, shields burned, hulls cracked. Ships shuddered under the weight of the storm. A cruiser named Aurora took the brunt, breaking apart in a burst of light. Its crew did not scream, they sent one last message. "Hold the line," and then they were gone. The loss cut deep, but it did not break them. Humanity answered. The warships roared, railguns thundered. Plasma lances cut swathes through the armada. Missiles struck with the fury of storms. Entire Predator squadrons vanished in waves of fire. Every ship fought like a living creature. Dreadnoughts charged forward, their cannons spitting death. Carriers unleashed swarms of fighters that tore through enemy lines like blades of light. Even damaged frigates refused to fall back. They rammed enemy cruisers, sacrificing themselves to tear open gaps for others. The Predators were furious. They had never faced prey that bit back, never faced prey that fought with such fire. Their warlords screamed across comms, ordering ships to crush the humans. Yet for every order given, more Predator ships fell. Still, the weight of the armada pressed on. Human losses grew. Dreadnoughts staggered. Fighters were burned from the sky. For every Predator ship destroyed, more came to replace it. The battle became a storm with no end. In the heart of the fight, the Terran flagship Eternal Flame advanced. Its hull was scarred, its shields fading, but its cannons glowed like suns. It fired volley after volley, tearing apart enemy battleships. Its roar carried across the comms, inspiring every human ship to hold. On the colony's surface, survivors watched in awe. Children pointed at the sky, where fire bloomed like storms of light. Elders whispered prayers not of fear but of hope. They saw humans standing against the impossible, and for the first time they believed the Predators could fall. Then the Predator Empire revealed its final weapon. From the shadow of their fleet, a colossal ship emerged, larger than any dreadnought. Its hull was black as night, bristling with weapons. At its core pulsed a planet killer, a weapon built to erase entire worlds in one strike. Gasps filled human command centers. The Admiral stared at the readings in silence. The weapon charged, its glow spreading across the void. If it fired, the colony would be gone, the fleet would be gone, and Earth itself could be next on the Vigilant. Captain Mara clenched her fists, her voice did not shake. "We cannot let it fire." Every ship received the same order. Every crew understood this was not about survival anymore. This was about sacrifice. The war raged on, but humanity focused its fury. Railguns and missiles locked onto the superweapon. Dreadnoughts threw themselves into its path. Their destruction shook the void, but they bought seconds, precious seconds. The Predators laughed. "You cannot stop this," their warlord sneered. "You are only human." But they did not understand. To be human was to fight when all hope was lost. To be human was to roar even when drowned in silence. The Terran flagship burned brighter. Its engines flared. Its captain gave one final order. For the cry. The Eternal Flame surged forward, ramming into the Predator weapon at full speed. The void exploded with light brighter than any sun. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield. Predator ships were thrown aside. Human warships staggered. Silence followed. In that silence, humanity did not fall. They stood, battered and bleeding but alive. The weapon was gone. The Predators broken. The roar of human warships had shaken the stars. The echo that changed the galaxy. The battlefield was quiet. Drifting wrecks floated in the void. Predator ships burned in silence. Human warships hung battered and scarred. Some broken, some still burning, but none retreating. The roar of the Eternal Flame still echoed. Though the ship itself was gone, the Predator armada was shattered. Their warlords screamed in disbelief, their fleet scattered. The empire that had laughed at weakness had been humbled, their pride crushed beneath the steel and fire of humanity. They fled into the dark, leaving the colony behind on the Vigilant. Captain Mara stood at her bridge. Her face was lit by the glow of ruined screens. Her crew sat in silence, exhausted, wounded, but alive. She whispered the words no one else could speak. They will never mock us again. Rescue ships descended to the surface of the colony. Marines swept through ruins searching for survivors, and then, in the shadows of a broken tower, they found a small figure, a child weak, trembling, but alive. It was the same voice that had echoed through the stars, the same cry that had reached Earth. The Marines lifted the child gently, wrapping them in a blanket. The comms carried the news across the fleet. We found the one who called. Cheers and tears filled every ship. Hardened soldiers bowed their heads. Engineers wept at their stations, humanity had answered. And the voice was no longer alone. The colony rose again under human protection. Medical ships landed, food and supplies poured down. Survivors lifted their hands to the sky, thanking the warships that had saved them. They no longer saw Earth as distant or weak. They saw Earth as a shield across the galaxy. The story spread like wildfire. Empires that had mocked now whispered in fear. The council sat in silence, no laughter left in their chambers. The predators who had once hunted the weak now hid in the shadows. For the galaxy had learned a truth it had never wanted to face. The truth that humanity had risen. The truth that when others ignored a cry, Earth would not. The truth that the weakest voice could call the strongest fleet. In the ruins of the battlefield, the Terran fleet regrouped. Every ship bore scars, every crew carried loss. But every heart burned with pride. They had stood against the impossible. They had protected the innocent, they had answered. The child who had cried out looked at the stars from the deck of a medical ship. Their small voice carried across the comms once more. Thank you. And those two words were stronger than any victory speech. They carried through every warship, every heart, and every soul. Captain Mara listened in silence, her eyes closed. She thought of the eternal flame, of the crews who would never return, of the cost humanity had paid. She also thought of the future, a future where no cry would go unanswered. The fleet turned for home. Engines burning soft, they carried survivors. They carried stories, they carried hope. And behind them floated wrecks of the predators, silent reminders of what had been unleashed. From that day, the galaxy spoke of Earth in whispers. Some called them dangerous, others called them saviors. But all remembered the same words. When a cry echoed through the stars, only Earth answered, and the echo of that cry would never fade.